Hello, malt mates. Welcome to the Whiskey Bothy. I'm Ralphie with Ralphie Review 1068X for extras, extra content, extra information, extra perspective, extra views. And it is a view. What I give you is an opinion. I state it in the description box because I mean it. It's an opinion. But we have to be so careful what we say these days, don't we? We have to self-censorship in order to remain in lockstep. Tell me I'm wrong. No, I'm not. It's a sign of the times. So, on with the show. I've just reviewed this bottle of whiskey. It's called Wireworks. It's English whiskey from the heart of England, and it won the 2024 English Online Whiskey Awards, and here it is. A transparent label, an interesting bottle with a wee bit of little glass twist at the top, stylish and different. It's bourbon cask matured. They claim it's lightly peated, but I'm not seeing the light peatiness much at all. It's virtually invisible, but it doesn't matter because it's still a damn good whiskey. And what else can I add? Well, I think it's been a worthy winner in the English Online Whiskey Awards. Very worthy. And it's English whiskey, by the way. It clearly states single malt English whiskey. And you might say, right, fine, Ralphie, you mentioned that in the last video. So what about this video? What extra content are you going to give us? And I'm going to give you a little bit of an opinion on a legacy media press release from the dear old BBC, who are very rigorous in maintaining the narrative for the state. And there's a spat on the go. Now, for those of you whose English is your second language, you might not have heard of the word spat. It's spelt S-P-A-T, spat. And it's a short, aggressive argument with a lot of noise around it. But generally, it's not of any particular importance because there's actually other important things which really need to be addressed but aren't. And I was given a link to the BBC article by Patreon subscribers, Sam and Gary. And it basically goes like this. I'm going to paraphrase this BBC. Typical, all sorts of short paragraphs with spaces between, typical of the BBC, and they don't actually lay things out in sequence. But basically, it starts by saying plans to allow English whiskey makers to use the term single malt have led to a backlash by Scottish distilleries and politicians. Under proposals being considered by the UK government, single malt English whiskey could be used for the spirit made by a single distillery in England, which I'm sure to you and certainly to me makes an awful lot of sense. However, there's complications, there always is. You see, with Scotch whiskey, single malt, the definition of single malt is basically that the grain is brought to the single malt distillery where it is sparged to get the juice out the grain, and then it is fermented and then distilled all on the one location. And that is a statutory definition of the application single malt Scotch whisky. However, individuals involved in defining the definition of English single malt whisky are suggesting that it only applies to the distillation part of the process and not the first two stages of sparging and fermentation. In other words, you could have about a dozen distilleries in an area who, to reduce the investment in their distillery. They're simply a distillation unit exclusively, and they buy in the ready fermented wash from a larger factory. It could be a beer brewery. In fact, it probably would be. And therefore, the definition of an English single malt whisky would be different to a Scotch single malt whisky. Now, people are not happy about it in the Scotch whisky industry, and the Scotch Whisky Association are involved, and I quote, however, the Scotch Whisky Association, in brackets SWA, they always put that, said it, quote, devalues single malts because it claims the English method would be simpler than the process used in Scotland. And this has involved a government bureaucracy called DEFRA, which is basically distilleries and, Department of Farming and Rural Affairs, that's what it means. And they have claimed that the decisions have been made and the application process is ongoing. What do I think of this? Well, let's make a comparison here. Irish single malt whisky is different from Scotch single malt whisky and does not devalue the interpretation of single malt Scotch whisky, which must be 100% malted barley. In Irish whisky, spelt with an E of course, not always though, some Irish whiskies do not have the E in it. For traditional reasons, I'll leave it at that. But you're not stuck to using a single variety of grain, in other words barley, when you're making Irish whisky. You can use oats for making Irish whisky. And we see this in a brand called Drumshambo, and very successful too. It brings a delightful creaminess to the spirit. And also, with Irish whisky, you can combine unmalted or green barley with the malted barley, and I would say that intelligent invested whisky customers, like you and I, are smart enough to know the difference. And I would also suggest that if the English whisky industry was to commission its pre-distillation liquors, that we would be aware of it because it would be a strong topic of discussion online. Now, I think what the Scotch Whisky Association is concerned about, at least the people that pay their money, so the corporations, what their concern is that your passive consumer doesn't bother reading labels. They don't care about provenance really. They just want this brand experience. And they will think that Scotch whisky and English whisky are the same thing because, frankly, there's a lot of thick people out there. Tell me I'm wrong. I'm not being judgmental, but honestly, there are a lot of thick people out there. And they just look at a bottle and they look at the price and there's a £5 off because they hyped the price up by a tenner in the supermarket the previous week, so they feel they're getting a bargain, you know. And they walk out with their English whisky and they won't have a clue that it's not been all made at the one distilling location, that it's perhaps been fabricated at multiple locations, a brewery for example, a dedicated pre-distillate wash servicing facility. I would say that this is actually undermining the reputation of English whisky already. And English single malt whisky is giving an absolute legitimate reason to regard it as inferior, which should not be the case and might well not be the case at all. But it will be treated as such. So I really don't think it's a good move. I think there should be a third definition. And basically, if an English whisky distillery chooses to do everything in-house, from getting the raw grain in to resting it, then sparging and washing and then fermenting it, cooling the wort, and then fermenting it into the wash, then they're actually being shortchanged here by neighbouring distilleries that are doing things more streamlined by involving third-party outside facilities and basically wash providers. So I think there needs to be a third definition, and it says that, and I think the clue's in the word single, and it should be replaced with standard. So you should have a standard English malt whisky where everything's not done in sight, and it protects the reputation of those English distilleries that want to do everything in the Scottish style on site, which is quite a lot of distilleries actually. And they should be allowed to use the word single malt whisky, single malt English whisky. The important thing is the geographical moniker. If it's a distillery in England, it needs to say England. If it's in Scotland, it needs to say Scotland. If it's in Ireland, it needs to say Ireland. And I find it interesting that the Scotch Whisky Association seems to be focusing on English whisky and not whisky from any other geographical location in the world. I mean, the biggest threat to Scotch whisky is actually a new generation of American whisky, American single malt whisky. And if the Americans decide that they're going to buy and wash from a large brewery, there's absolutely nothing the Scotch Whisky Association can do about it, because that's a sign of the times and that's the reality of economics. Personally, I think the Scotch Whisky Association have got bigger issues on their hands than this. I think the fact that His Majesty's Revenue and Customs, which give permission certificates for people to store casks in warehouses after background checks as to their honesty and integrity, the fact that that system is being erased and not replaced with anything substantial means that it's going to allow criminal behaviour to enter into the Scotch whisky industry. My concern is, at what point is the Scotch Whisky Association going to wake up to the potential scandal of the incursion of criminal elements owning warehouses and filling them with casks which have fake age statements, fake content, and fake whisky. Unfortunately, it's only a matter of time, and it's a very serious situation which needs to be addressed right now, because when it blows, that will do far more damage to Scotch whisky's reputation than anything that any English whisky distillery is up to or planning. We're at a moment in time where people are getting seriously pissed off with I'm going to create the word for it, hyper pricing of older Scotch whiskies. The sudden dramatic elevation in price, increase in price, for no apparent reason. It's got nothing to do with the rate of inflation. It's the Scotch whisky industry trying to premiumise older aged whiskies purely based on the length of time in the cask without any reference to the actual quality of the cask in the first place. Market forces will decide this at the end of the day. My opinion is that it won't be very well handled, because that is bureaucracy these days. It will move on, it will die down, it will settle down, and I think English distilleries will get to do what they want to do, and why not? Because when it's in England, good luck. It's got nothing to do with Scotland. I mean, the two countries are joined, but that's purely a historical legacy. And Scotland exists only because of the determination of two bishops in early medieval times. And this is all hidden history, by the way. You're not supposed to know this. So there you have it, malt mates. An interesting little, what I called a spat. So let's see where it goes. Frankly, it doesn't really affect you and I, because at the end of the day, our primary mission, which every distilling industry, no matter where it's located, cannot let out of its sights, is that increasingly we are fussy customers, and if we are not getting quality for the price we're paying, we will walk away faster than we've ever done before, because we reserve the right to do so. That is our principle. That is our prerogative. And some businesses playing games with us, and also the disingenuous, fabricated banality of orthodox marketing, that's got to be addressed. It's, even when we're not buying the product, we know we're paying for that marketing, and we're paying an excessive premium for that waste of money. And it puts us off the brand, it puts us off the product, and we're spoiled for choice now, and not just for whiskey, but for rum and bourbon, Armagnac. There are other spirits around the world, and when they appear, like for example Palinka, we'll be right in there. It won't take long. Because what drives the reputation of any business in the world today that's producing whiskey is their presence and their rating in social media. And don't you forget it. Bye-bye.